Hello, my name is Alice Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Nurses Association and your host for this edition of Illinois Nurse Live. Today's guest is Jose Moreno. Jose is a registered nurse, an INA member, and a union steward at the University of Illinois Hospital. He also served on the negotiating committee for his local unit. Thank you for joining with us today.
You're welcome.
So, how you work in the operating room? Let's talk, about some general things about your experience. How long have you been an OR nurse?
All my career, I've been a nurse for 25 years.
And do you think being an OR nurse is a rewarding career?
Absolutely. I enjoy it every day, and I think it's been more rewarding now more than ever.
Okay. And would you recommend it to a student nurse?
Absolutely, all the time. At the University of Illinois where I work, we have student nurses and nurses that are graduating, and I've always recommended it.
Okay. And what do you find to be the most rewarding part of your job?
Well, it's in surgery, patients come in that are ill, and we perform surgery, and it's nice to know that we took care of their issues, and from our standpoint that, they're going to get better, and it's nice to know that.
And as a male nurse, you're a minority in the nursing profession. What can you tell us about the experience of being a male nurse in a profession that's mostly women?
Well, for me, it's been very positive. When I was very young, I graduated from high school and I joined the military, and there also nursing is dominated by females, and I was very lucky to have people that mentor me since then. And when I became a nurse in the areas that I worked in, it's always been very rewarding to work with my female counterparts, and I've always enjoyed learning from them and teaching.
Very good, very good. Oh, and also I want to mention you're watching an interactive call-in program on CAN TV and online at cantv.org/hotline. During the next 25 minutes, we're going to discuss various topics impacting nurses today, including the experience of being a union nurse, the impact of the state budget on health care, the governor's pension proposal, and nursing. And you are invited to call in with your questions at 312-738-1060, and the lines are currently open. So you were part of the last negotiating committee at the University of Illinois Hospital. Can you tell us what that experience was like?
Yeah, certainly. I enjoyed working with a team of other nurses, senior nurses that have been nurses for a long time, and some of them have been in the negotiating process before. For me, it was the first time, and it was very interesting because it gave me the opportunity to present our side of the needs that nurses are still, fighting for. So that was very rewarding. I really enjoyed it.
What were some of the issues that you were fighting for in the contract negotiations?
Well, the hottest topics is still, and to me it's also a surprise that we're still fighting for, fair labor conditions. We're concerned about nurse staffing and the nurse ratio to patients. That's still, a situation that we're still fighting for. And to me, it's actually a little surprising. In 2015, we're still looking at, those kinds of issues that impact our patient population, and that in a way, it's a sicker patient population.
Mm-hmm. Can you get into some of the specifics about what you and some of the other nurses want when it comes to staffing?
Well, in a sense, obviously, we want our core staffing to be in a way rationed to where taking care. Well, for me, I work in the OR, so it's one patient at a time. But for my colleagues that work on the floors, it's the ratio of how many patients they have to take care of, and it's either it hasn't changed for 15, 25 years, or it's gotten worse to where because of budget issues or just financial issues, institutions are cutting back on nurses, or they're just giving nurses more patients to take care of. So, that impacts the quality of care that we provide.
Mm-hmm. And you said that the patients you see them getting sicker, you think?
Yeah, with the changes that have been in healthcare, there's a lot of, home health and hospice and surgery centers, and that takes a lot of the population that can be taken care of outside of the hospital, which means that what's left in the hospital is patients that are a lot sicker, that need a lot more attention, and in a lot of sense, specialty attention like intensive care units and the operating room.
Okay, very good. And can you tell us about, did you have any successes in the contract negotiations, and can you tell us a little bit about what those were?
Yeah, interestingly, people talk a lot about the financial issue, or what nurses make or what they deserve, and that wasn't our, obviously we negotiated some of that, but that wasn't our biggest concerns. Our biggest concerns for us was just the staffing of nurses to patients, and nurses being able to care for patients, and in fact, including just nurses being able to take a break or being able to take a meal break, and that sometimes is not possible. And in 2015, you would think that we've learned a lot from the past, and that nurses would be taken care of to where they would have enough staff to provide breaks for a nurse, and for nurses to be able to go and eat.
How do you think that impacts patient care when a nurse can't get a break or isn't able to, eat when they're working a long shift?
Right. Yeah. Well, obviously, it's stressful, and we've all been there where whatever job you do, if you work long hours, your body feels it, and obviously physically and mentally. So obviously, yes, you're not as sharp as you would be, and those are issues that maybe once or twice wouldn't affect your care, but if it's a chronic situation where it's week after week after week and months and literally years of that's how the business is run, then it affects you absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And nurses in general are many of them are in their 50s.
Yes.
I think it maybe has a greater impact. It's different when you're in your 50s versus when you're in your early 20s, beginning your career.
Sure, just like everything else, and yes, our the core of our nursing population is in the 40s and 50s, and again, I've been a nurse for 25 years, and since I was in school, there was a nursing shortage, and that hasn't changed much. Amazingly, that in 25 years we're still at that point where the care of the population that we do care for is and the nursings that are needed for that, it hasn't been adequate for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Let's switch to a discussion about some of the recent proposals that the governor has put forward with in regard to pensions. There was a 500-page pension proposal that included cuts for pensions for nurses that work for the state of Illinois, and also nurses that work for the University of Illinois, as well as many other public employees. What do you think the impact of pension cuts would have on nursing?
Well, obviously it's a financial situation, and just like any other group of people, we're fathers, we're mothers, we have family members that we need to take care of, and of course we deserve a salary that's compatible to what we do. And I think we've realized that as important as nurses are and the shortages that are there, we feel that we're not being heard, we're not being listened to as far as what should be a compatible salary for us, and I think that if this is going to continue, the profession of nursing, people might not be attracted to it, and it could hurt the careers of those people.
Do you see that sometimes it's a struggle to fill nursing positions?
Oh, sure. It's not only within different hospitals, but I think that people nowadays, they go to school and they're choosing careers, and they see some of these issues that are coming up with nursing, and I think people are starting to think twice about it.
And also within the governor's proposal for pensions, there's also a section in there that would take away certain collective bargaining rights for public employees, including union nurses that work in the university system and also in the state system. That includes making it it would make it a prohibited subject of bargaining for certain topics. For example, you would no longer be able to negotiate staffing, you would no longer be able to negotiate hours or wages or seniority. How do you think that would impact your work?
Well, it would definitely, obviously, have a direct impact because the unions have historically, protected the workers, and when, like I mentioned before, when we're still not able to have, even a meal break, those kinds of issues are very important. And I think without the unions, our voices are already muted up to a point, and without the union, I don't think our voices would be heard at all. And not, and from across the board in all kinds of issues, core staffing, ratio of population as far as what we are able to take care of, and it will definitely have an effect on, I think, people either choosing to go into nursing or staying in nursing.
Okay, very good. And we have a caller. We'll take a...
Yes, good evening. How y'all guys doing? Real quick, it seems like people don't, this is a job not to make money, but you have to care and love what you're doing. That's number one. And it seems like less people. Only thing people doing now is just collecting a check. But listen, some time ago I was on the floors, and I got blessed, and I went upstairs to administration. There was a great big gap from suits to the floors. You was in school, you taught to save lives, but when you go upstairs, it's about only one thing. It's a business, make money. And there's where it's a lot of problems there. They want to understand, but they don't understand. They really don't care. And like you say, it's less nurses now. Now more nurses. You know what? RN now is the doctor. She the one that does all the work on the floor. And I'm sorry, too, for you, man, as a male, because I know all heavy, any kind of muscular work, they call you. I don't care. You got to go anywhere. But you're lucky you're no R, too. But when you're on the floors, man, you're humping. You're working. You are really working. And sometimes people don't realize you get tired. And when you get tired, that's where the mistakes come.
That's right.
So things do happen. So if any way possible, hopefully maybe a suit might be listening. If you want to save a life, put another body on the floor. I already heard what hospital yet. They always making money. They always make it. They steady building, but yet and still they tell you that they don't have the money to put down and hire people. Well, listen, I don't know. I'd rather hire one to let one die by mistake. So they got to sometimes. One thing, if you live long enough, guess what? You're going to get sick. So you're going to need somebody. Listen, good show. Good comments, too.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jose. We're going to switch
You're
out to our
welcome.
next guest. Well, thank you for being with us.
Sure.
I'll switch just one moment. Hello? Oh, the chair. Oh, there you go. Okay, very good. And we're back. As a reminder, you can call in with your questions. We invite you to call in with your questions at 312-738-1060. Phone lines are open. And we have our next guest, Kelly Phelps. Kelly Phelps is a correctional nurse and an INA member. Welcome to the show. So how long have you worked in corrections?
It's been just about 3 years now. And I've been a nurse for 4.
Okay, very good. So you're relatively at the beginning of your career.
Right.
And how have you found corrections nursing so far?
I think it's really interesting work. It's something different pretty much every day. Some days are really busy and others are a little slower. So,
what do you find to be the most challenging part of your job?
it's probably, I would say, the different personalities that you have to deal with. Some people are, they just want help, and others are very difficult when they come in, and they do have, expect just that they should get everything they want sometimes. So, yeah.
And what do you, is it a rewarding career?
I think it is. you do get to see some people that actually want to change, and when you get to help them, it is rewarding. So.
Okay, very good. And we have a caller. Caller, go ahead with your question.
Yes, thank you. My question is, how does the nurse or how does this organization view the vitalness of public health and public health nursing?
Do you want to answer that? What's how
think-
vital is public health nursing?
I think public health nursing kind of ties in with all different areas of nursing, especially probably corrections, because when they go out there, they do need to reach out to public health for the health care they need, because a lot of them don't have insurance, and so they are going to need that help. So.
And does the care that the inmates receive while they're in the correctional center, does that affect public health at all?
I think it does. There are some education programs, and hopefully, they can learn to take care of themselves and go out there and make better choices and, stay away from drugs and that kind of stuff.
Very good. All right. Thank you, caller. Let's talk a little bit about nurses working excessive hours. We had some discussion previously. You said you had recently had an incident in which a registered nurse worked 3 shifts in a row, and that
would have been 24 hours straight.
Can you tell us what happened?
For one thing, we're really short-staffed, and that's most of the time how it is with correctional nursing. And we also had a nurse. We had 2 nurses sick and call off, and then we had someone on vacation. So that ended up sticking a nurse working 24 hours.
Mm-hmm. And what's that like for a nurse when they have to work that many hours straight through?
I've been lucky enough to never have to work a 24-hour shift, but I've had to do several 16s and some 16s in a row sometimes, and I can tell you that you're just exhausted, and then you have to question if you have the ability to really care for the patients like they need.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right, exactly.
Right.
According to studies, they say that a nurse who's working exhausted is more likely to, there's more likely to be errors or cause errors. What have you seen at the workplace?
I've seen nurses just working like 16-hour shifts, probably more than one in a row, and then you notice that they're making a lot of mistakes, and or if there's nurses, like if we're short-staffed, we only have a couple nurses on, you'll see a higher incidence of mistakes.
Mm-hmm. What's your experience as a union nurse? How do you think that's different working in a unionized environment versus working in maybe at an employer that doesn't have a union?
I think there's a lot more protection if you do happen to make a mistake. A lot of times it can be very punitive working for corrections, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so they do, watch you, and it's a way to, checks and balances to make sure you're doing your job, but also it can come into play where you are in trouble very easily. Mm-hmm. And even after working 16 hours, they don't make a distinction between being, there for 8 or there for 16 hours.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the protections that you do have as a union nurse that a nurse in a non-union environment would not have?
I can always have someone in the room with me if I get called in, if they're going to give me some type of counseling. If I have a hearing, there can be someone in the room with me. I have the right to grieve if I get any kind of punishment. And it's very nice to have that as, help for me and backup.
So, say for example, if your supervisor wanted to talk to you about, one of those mistakes that occurs during one of those really long shifts, then you could have a union representative with you when that questioning or that meeting is taking place.
Yes, and normally you have to sometimes ask, but you can bring someone in there with you and you don't have to face it alone.
Very good, very good. So let me ask you a little bit about, what are your thoughts on the governor's pension proposal and what impacts that would have on nursing if there's cuts to pensions for state nurses?
I think we'll see a lot of good state nurses leaving. A part of the job is difficult, and so part of the benefits are having the pension and the vacation and the health care, and I think we'll see a lot leave and look for other jobs.
And you mentioned earlier that already staffing in corrections is a challenge.
Right. It only takes us losing one nurse, and there's a lot more work. So.
And also, the proposal contains a provision that would eliminate your right to collectively bargain over wages and hours, as well as seniority rights. What impact do you think that would have?
Well, if you didn't have a choice in, to fight for your wages and to, fight for your seniority because you've been there for a long time, I think that's another reason we'd see nurses finding other jobs and we'd be losing nurses. So.
And you would be unable to negotiate, any type of limitations on your hours at work.
So that would be unsafe for nurses and unsafe for patients.
Very good. Very good. So, we're ready to wrap up. Oh, thank you. That's all the time that we have for this evening. That's the conclusion of our show. Thank you and good night.